going to talk about if the gaming industry, publishers, developers, and mainstream gaming media have a responsibility to avoid sexism.
Unlike earlier, where I pretty much dismissed extreme radical feminist ideals, where they have opinions on things they know nothing about, and the more ignorant they are, the more opinions they have on what they don't know. But now I'm going to gravitate away from extreme radical feminists. But that does not mean I'm leaving social justice warriors alone just yet. That part is coming soon enough, and I'll be covering the response from the gaming industry. Now, I will not deny Anita's videos have caused some people to think. And while she spills man-hating bile under the guise of feminism, she has, on the rare occasion, brought up a valid point or two. Like, one valid point was that in one of the Scribblenauts games there was only one female character out of a slew of male characters, each other having their own different theme, which does alienate any younger female gamers wanting to play a female character with a unique theme, instead of a default one. I do not think that the lack of more female characters in that game was sexist, but possibly an oversight and not done purposely in some wild conspiracy theory to disparage women from games like Anita's videos would try to have you believe. Because as I said before, if you really listen to how she words her sentences, it really sounds like she's trying to peddle some conspiracy theory that video games are trying to oppress women.
Developers and publishers have acknowledged Anita's videos, but they don't really seem to care, and it's for a reason that I'll get into in a little bit.
Sure, Anita got the Ambassador's Award, and she didn't even thank the two guys that presented it to her, nor did she thank any male developers, but only thanked her female audience. But only some developers said that they were looking at treating female characters better, of which I think there was only one, but then made a statement of returning to the status quo, and that developer was Rockstar. But does the gaming industry have an obligation for equality and treating fictional female characters better? Well, I would say not more than any other industry or form of art. With that said, yes, the gaming industry has a lot of male employees, because more men are interested in video games. That's a true statistic. Whenever you see the developers at E3, it's mostly men. When you go to a GameStop, it's mostly men. When you read or watch reviews, they're mostly men. The gaming industry is a sausage fest, but so is the auto industry, but no one is complaining about that. And there's women out there that like cars just as much as men. Where's the social justice warriors when it comes to wanting gender equality in the automotive industry?
Social justice warriors will often ask how come there's not more female game developers, like it's some great philosophical question. Well, maybe it's more of a simple answer, because maybe, just maybe, there aren't that many women interested in game development.
There's no conspiracy to keep women out of game development, and there's nothing stopping a woman who likes games and wants to be part of the process from doing it. It's a matter of not being interested in it. For example, when I was in college for animation and game design, my first girlfriend, who's an artist, decided to take the same course as I was. I was ahead of her when she attended the same college, and she quit just under a year because she did not like it. My second girlfriend was also an artist, and she went to the same college for the same thing and quit around a year and a half because she did not like it. Both of them were gamers too, but they decided that making games just wasn't for them, because they didn't like their hobby of being artists, which they loved, turning into a job that they knew that they weren't going to like. And it's not an easy job either. I had a teacher who worked on Descent 2 and Duke Nukem Time to Kill and Land of the Babes. He was a very hard person to get an A from. He wanted detail. If you made a toaster in 3D, every single piece needed to be detailed. A lot of teachers were in those industries and knew exactly what they wanted to see from their students, because that's what the industry required. It's almost discouraging, especially when you look at how much people get laid off and studios closing left and right, needing to pick up and move every few years because they got laid off after a game was released and had to go to another state to work in a different studio.
If you got the talent, experience, and you have exactly what they're looking for, you have a very good chance of getting in. But if you don't, and like in the story I'm about to tell you, you are going to be SOL.
There was this girl that I used to watch on DeviantArt before she banned me from her page. The short version is that she expected her watchers to donate to a charity that no one knew about, because she never told anyone and was being really nasty about it, and I called her out on it. Well, she is a huge fan of Mass Effect and loves BioWare. She applied for BioWare and was rejected because her art portfolio was absolutely terrible. It was full of anime style stuff and fan art and even some anthropomorphic art. BioWare just didn't turn her down, they shot her down. down. In a professional way, though. They said that while she has talent, it's only for what she was doing, which is what they're not looking for and never will look for. The industry is looking for artists who can make almost photorealistic images from a pencil. A lot of students that I went to school with in the same courses had this very fantasized way of how their life would turn out. Some thought they would go to Japan and work for a famous animation or game studio. Some went so far as to believe that they would start their own studio in Japan. Some people thought that they would start their own studio here in America, which is grounded a little more in reality, but you're not going to do so right out of college. You're going to take whatever it is you can get, even if it's some no-name place that shuts down before their one and only product is ever completed, because you need the experience, and when you move up to bigger and better things, and maybe eventually to your own studio.
If you think you're going to be the next Shigeru Miyamoto, you're not. You're going to be a cog in the machine. I'm sorry to say that, but that is the harsh reality of it.
And the gaming industry does hire female game developers. And in this case, I'm broadening the term developer, meaning artist, music composer, writer, and programmer. I don't know the rate of how many they hire, but they do get hired. And I will admit that there are a lot more male game developers than female. And while the extreme radical feminists and other social justice warriors want more female developers, you cannot make them pop out of thin air. Do they not think that game studios wouldn't hire female employees if they had the talent to work there? There's no reason not to hire them if they have the right stuff. A female developer may be passed over in favor for a male developer if that person had more experience though, but that's any job. If you worked in retail for 5 years, you'll be considered for a retail job over someone who's never done it before. But the reason why there aren't that many female game developers is because there just aren't that many women interested in game development. At least not as many that social justice warriors or extreme radical feminists would like there to be. But it's getting there. Slowly, but it's getting there. You can't force women to become game developers if they don't want to. Just like you can't force a guy to be a construction worker if he doesn't want to. You can't force people to do a job they don't want to. You have to let them go into the field that they want to be in.
I'm not going to say that women won't be or aren't interested in game development, but the thing is, video games are still a young industry, especially when compared to a lot of the others. And keep this in mind. Women were not allowed to act until the 1660s. Before that, all female characters were portrayed by men.
The reason why I brought that up is because back in those days, things were a lot more oppressive towards women where there were very little job options for them, if any. Now there's lots of women actors, doctors, cops, and the list goes on. But those are professions that have been around a lot longer than game development. We do not live in some weird primitive society where men run everything with an iron fist. Yes, there are more men politicians, but there's women politicians too. Sarah Palin governed Alaska and was John McCain's running mate for vice president, and Hillary Clinton ran for president in Democrat primaries. Women can become leaders of countries too. South Korea, Chile, Costa Rica, and Argentina, just to name a few. Those countries have female presidents currently in office at time of writing. So yes, it can happen here in America too. But really my point is this: certain jobs just appeal to certain genders more than others. Gaming and game development just appeals more to males than females. For every 7 male gamers, there's 1 female gamer. Granted, that's changing now, and I'm glad that it is, but you cannot force change, although some reports say that it's about 50-50 if you include Facebook games and games on smartphones. I'm not going to put a game controller in someone's hand who is not interested in video games and force them to play, nor would I force somebody into a job that they don't want to do, or they are not qualified to do for the sake of equality.
I feel that the gaming industry, like any other industry out there, is required to hire the most capable person for the job at hand, which brings me to the question of wages. Female game developers get paid 14% less than male game developers, which has me asking, what are the parameters that claim is based around?
I've done some digging. There's been the claim that women make 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes, and that's according to the US Census Bureau that the Huffington Post reported on, but the Census Bureau report is no longer available. However, according to topmanagementdegrees.com, they say that the wage gap is true if you do not account for occupation, positions, education, job tenure, and hours worked per week, which actually closes the wage gap to women making 95 cents for every dollar that a man makes. According to them, expectations and gender stereotypes lead men to choose professions in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which are higher paying jobs than the ones that women choose, which are usually in healthcare and education, which pay less. In 10 of the more lucrative college majors, men greatly outweigh women, and in 10 of the less lucrative college majors, women outweigh men. So when I hear someone say that women make less, I ask what are the parameters? In the case of game development, what are the specifics? Is a fresh out of college female getting 14% less than a male who's been in the industry for 10 years? What if a male and female just graduated and went to different schools where the male graduated from a very renowned school and the girl didn't? Maybe they went to the same school and the male student had a better grade point average than the female. These are the questions that no one asks or people with agendas omit because it hurts their stance. If the male and female had the exact same amount of experience in the field and had the same education from the same school and the same grade point average, and their portfolios were equal in quality, and the female still got paid less, I would say that's not fair, because it's not. But to say that someone fresh from college should get the same amount of pay that someone who's been in the field for many years, that's not fair to the person who's been working in the field longer.
How would you feel if you were working at a job for 10 years, you got multiple raises and bonuses for all the great work you did, but then some new hire who just graduated from college is getting the same salary as you? You would be and should be rightfully pissed off.
Women also face more career disruptions than men. There's maternity leave, which women take more than men take paternity leave, and working mothers find it harder to advance than working fathers. It's all about how much you sacrifice and your choices that you make, but women are and have been making the move for higher paying jobs, and good for them. I want them to. They're breaking these gender stereotypes and setting new standards for women. And when you take into account like the Civil Rights Act being signed into law in 1964, we've come a very long way in 51 years compared to the very slow, if any, progress of the centuries before that. Now, should the gaming industry cater to women by making games that appeal to them? It's a question we can say yes to, but here's the problem. As mentioned earlier, male gamers outnumber female gamers 7 to 1. Gaming is still a very male-orientated demographic, so if there were to be games that cater to a female demographic, it needs to be done slowly and subtly. They can't just plop down a whole bunch of games with female characters because that can cause oversaturation, and therefore a disinterest in those games. Earlier, I said that things were not going to change for gaming as they are now because the medium is going towards that all-inclusive demographic already. But the reason why there won't be a fast dramatic change like how the social justice warriors want is because of one simple reason. EA has gone on record saying that games that are targeted towards women just don't sell very well.
Think of it this way. You're a game developer. Do you want to make a game for 7 guys or 1 girl? It's basically asking the question of, do you want to make $420 or $60? It's basic economics. You need to yield enough profit so you can make your overhead and stay in business.
The budgets for games are already overinflated as they are. The gaming industry can't just jump into the foray of female-orientated games and expect to turn a profit with a 7 to 1 statistic. That's why the developers have been easing into being inclusive of the female demographic. Even Nintendo has been gravitating that way. In Super Mario 3D World, you can play as Peach. You can play as a female Toadette in Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. And as stated beforehand, BioWare has been making games where the lead character can easily be played by a male or female, heterosexual or homosexual. Mascot-orientated games like Ratchet & Clank or Mario are going to be harder to have female playable characters, because the mascot is a guy. But Sly started to. There were small sections of Sly 3 where you could play as Carmelita, and Sly 4 gave her a pretty large role and a lot more playtime, because she played a much bigger role than her previous roles in the series. And Sonic is going to be impossible because people, male and female, bitch about his games no matter what Sega does, so I'm not even going to include that series. And there are developers who are sticking to their guns about keeping characters as they are, like Don't Nod, who are making the episodic Life is Strange game. Every publisher wanted the characters to be switched to males instead of females, except for Square Enix, who did not care.
Well, I'm glad that the character stayed female, but I can understand where the publishers are coming from. Do you want to make money from 7 people or 1 person?
I myself am not interested in Life is Strange, not because the characters are female, but because the premise doesn't seem interesting to me at all. Even if the characters were male, I would not be interested. but I do think that publishers should have more confidence in publishing newer and different types of games instead of the same copy and paste garbage that we get every year. And publishers should not have any creative input on the game series that they do not own. Their job is to advertise the game and get it into players' hands. And when it comes to advertising, they could do a much better job. Like with the Mass Effect games, they could have shown the female Shepard more often. I think she was only in a trailer one time and it was for the third game. They should have showcased her more. When Call of Duty Advanced Warfare was running its commercials, you got a first-person view of what was happening and everything you're supposed to be able to do. In one part, the guy sees a woman and she's coming on to him, only for her to be a goat. I see nothing wrong with it. The game series is targeted towards a male demographic, so it's going to have things in it that cater to men. I know that there's women who play Call of Duty too, but again, 7 guys to 1 girl. Know your demographic, that's economics. Women's advertising works the same way. Look at the 50 Shades of Grey movie trailer. You cannot tell me that there's anything there that caters to men. I never read 50 Shades of Grey, but it's being advertised as a female power fantasy. It's a woman who finds a guy who is not only devoted to her, but will give her anything and everything she wants. The guy is Scrooge McDuck wealthy, has influential power. He's good looking and from the trailer looks like he knows where the heaven for vaginas is. And the movie was released today, Valentine's Day, a day where men bend over backwards for their girlfriends or wives.
Are you going to sit there and tell me that nobody on this planet would like a partner like that? Of course not. Everyone wants their 3 wishes from a genie because it's human nature to want your desires fulfilled. Why do you think the lottery and gambling is such a successful business?
And I can just as easily say that 50 Shades of Grey portrays men negatively, perpetuating the male gender stereotype that all men are extremely horny and disgustingly perverted. But I'm not going to do that, because I know that I am not the target demographic for that movie, and I'm not going to twist things around and purposely misinterpret things to suit my own personal agenda. Because I have no agenda. I'm just applying common sense to this whole controversial fiasco. Now, I don't see why developers cannot include options for female avatars in games that are targeted towards men, because women do play those games as well. Like when Assassin's Creed Unity was shown off. All 4 characters were male and it was met with questions why they were all male characters, and Ubisoft said something along the lines of that it would have been too hard to do, and that it would have caused delays and was past the game's budget. That seems like a reasonable explanation. But when you think about it, why didn't they plan for 2 of the 4 characters to be female from the start instead of going with an all-male cast? It would have been the same amount of money to build, texture, rig, animate, and voice the characters. I think this was an oversight on their part. They probably did not think about it, and considering how the game turned out upon its release, it's obvious that it was an oversight on their part. Like when Nintendo did not include same-sex marriage in Tomodachi Life. Yeah, it was a huge controversy, mostly due in part to Nintendo PR dropping the ball. But you were able to work around it by making a female character look like a male. But some game developers, there was this one that Jim Sterling mentioned in an episode of the Jimquisition, I forgot the name of the developer and the game, but they made it a free-to-play game on Steam, and they told him that it wasn't very hard to make a female playable character.
So if an indie developer of a free-to-play game was able to include female playable characters, then your AAA developers do not have an excuse for not including female avatars.
But there's games like Skullgirls where it's an all-female cast and people love it. It's gotten a lot of recognition, and I would say if there's a fighting game targeted towards women, Skullgirls would definitely fall into that category. Even the story is, or at least can be seen as, targeted towards a female demographic. But true success would be a game that caters to all demographics. Reason being is that everyone would buy it. In that aspect, casual games on mobile devices, love them or hate them, cater to everyone. They're simple little time wasters that everyone seems to enjoy, like Angry Birds, a series that has had just as much success as Minecraft, which is another game that everyone loves. And even though Steve is the player's default avatar, it can be changed to a female character if the player chooses. Some people have gone as far as modding other games and swapping out sprites or models to play as female characters. I had a mod for Sonic Generations that allowed you to play as Blaze. There was a father that swapped out Link for Zelda in the original Zelda game so that his daughter can play as a female protagonist. The gaming community has taken it upon itself to mod games so they can have female avatars if there are none. Granted, the gaming community probably should not need to do that, but it shows that there's an interest in it. But again, this is something that would have been more of a valid topic many years ago, because it's rather pointless to bring it up as an issue now and use older games as a platform to build an argument on.
You can't point to the 1985 Super Mario Bros. And say that it's sexist and empowers women because you're a male that's rescuing a female and that it negatively affects our culture. Because right now, there's a lot of games that allow you to play as a female character.
So I don't believe that developers have an obligation to cater to a female audience because they're already doing it. But that doesn't mean they should stop, they should definitely keep going. But in cases like Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed Unity, they could have done better by planning ahead more. Even if the series has become a copy and paste job in recent times, maybe the publishers who do all the advertising can do a better job at showing off the female avatars in the games where you can play as either gender. Like how the Skyrim ads always showed the guy in them when the Dragonborn character can be either gender. Or when Mass Effect mostly showed male Shepard in advertisements. But I think that's all coming in due time. But what about gaming-related websites? Well, they do hire female writers, but I don't think they're doing a really good job at what they do, and they handled the Gamergate controversy horribly, and that's going to be the next topic. I was going to include them in the social justice warriors topic, but I feel that because they are part of the gaming industry as a whole, they should be included in this one. There's 3 websites that I frequent: Kotaku, Joystick, and Polygon. First, I'll talk about Joystick. I feel that they tried to stay neutral when this whole sexism and gaming controversy broke out. They reported on it, but they were pretty neutral on it, at least it seemed that way to me. Because all the articles that I read didn't seem to take a side and they were pretty quick to bow out of it. So they became my go-to site for gaming-related news, as did Games Radar because they stayed completely out of it, or at least I never saw them talk about it.
At first, Kotaku was leading the charge, but only for the reins of the social justice wagon to be taken over by Polygon.
Kotaku seemed to have dropped all their social justice warrior nonsense, which must have been due to the backlash they were getting from their audience. Or they may have just moved it over to a different site within the Gawker network. However, Polygon hasn't even stopped, and they'll bring up Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian any chance they get. They continue to demonize their own audience, which is the problem I have with Polygon lately. They've been trying to make you feel guilty that you're a male gamer, like their Bayonetta 2 review where they took major issue with Bayonetta's design and held it against the game and gave it a lower score because of it. And the thing is, Bayonetta was designed by a woman, so I don't know what to say there. So even if a woman creates a sexually empowered woman, it's not okay. The social justice warriors will just omit that the character was made by a woman. Polygon has gotten so bad with their social justice warrior bullshit that there's a disclaimer in their articles where the thoughts of the author do not represent the thoughts of Polygon. How stupid do they think we are? The author of the article works for Polygon. Of course it represents the thoughts of Polygon. It's not like when you watch a commentary made by the actors or directors of a movie and they express their personal opinions, and the film studio says those thoughts are not a representation of them, because those actors and directors don't work specifically for that studio. They are contracted by the studio.
If you work specifically for one company, you are a representation of that company. So anything you do or say is a reflection upon that company. And if you do something incredibly stupid, the company goes ahead and rectifies what you did, which means making a public apology and firing you.
I think that the whole controversy of sexism in gaming should have been something that writers of gaming websites should have kept their personal opinions to themselves, and let their viewers decide what to think for themselves by presenting all the information objectively, only because it's a very sensitive subject. But instead they were telling people what to think. They were trying to make male gamers feel guilty for being male gamers. I'm not saying that the writers for these gaming media outlets should not express their own personal opinions, but I do not think that they should have posted it on these sites that they work for, but kept it to their own personal social media sites, like Facebook or Twitter. And I say that they should have kept it to their own personal outlets and not their work is because they really fanned the flames, and they kept pouring gasoline on a grease fire. It made their websites look horrible and really ruined their reputations. I would leave comments that they were making the situation worse and worse the more they reported on it, which would in turn cause more harassment against people like Anita Sarkeesian, who does not deserve to be harassed. She does deserve to be criticized for her sexist remarks, but she would spin anything about her around and capitalize on the harassment and threats she got, which in turn gaming media would report on again.
So I do think that the gaming media does share the responsibility of continuing to create a problem where there was originally none. And the irony of me talking about this subject on YouTube is not lost on me.
Yes, I review and talk about gaming here, but while I'm independent like most YouTubers, I am still a part of gaming media, but I'm not even a blip on the radar. I'm not a social justice warrior, and I have no agenda here other than trying to bridge a gap that's been created by extreme radical feminists and social justice warriors, and the people who side with them. I'm just applying common sense to all of this because things have gotten so black and white that people are lost in the dark and blinded by the light. Like when Christina Hoff Sommers, also known as the factual feminist, made a video saying that she didn't see any sexism in video games, and that there's no reason for game developers to cater to females because she saw games as something that's meant for males. She reasoned that asking for developers to cater to a female demographic would be like asking shows like The View or Cosmopolitan magazine to cater to men, saying that each gender has its own form of media that caters to them. And she was right. There are forms of media that cater to each gender. But that does not mean that they can't try to appeal to a wider demographic, as it would mean more sales. She dismissed the claims of Anita Sarkeesian and quoted a study where as video games surged in popularity, crime has gone down, and repeated what we all knew, that there is no correlation between violent games and violent crimes, and that these people who call themselves feminist critics cherry-pick and twist everything around to suit their own needs. But what really set me off was that Polygon writer Colin Campbell wrote an article that completely dismissed what Sommers had said, and he parroted what Sarkeesian has said, whereas Sarkeesian just parrots the opinions of those that think like her.
But you may be thinking that there's something that the gaming industry can do. Well, look. The car is already on the road, and it's heading in the direction that you want it to go in, and it's going there as fast as it can. And as much as you want it to go faster, it's just not going to go that fast.
The problem is that social justice warriors and extreme radical feminists aren't doing anything to solve the problem. And the reason why they can't, or just aren't doing anything to solve the problem, is because it doesn't exist. Even if it did, it's easily rectifiable. They said that a majority of game developers are men and therefore are making games for men, and there's a lack of female developers. You see where I'm going here, right? Instead of criticizing the industry for a lack of women in it and lack of games featuring female protagonists, why not start your own game development studio? Isn't that a much better solution than sitting on your butt and complaining about nothing? Honestly, why aren't all these extreme radical feminists not starting their own game development studios? If they're holding onto this belief that there's some sort of conspiracy in the gaming industry to keep women oppressed and are demanding change, why aren't they being the change? Why don't they go to school for game design? There's nothing stopping them from doing it. If anyone is standing in their way, it's themselves. There's nothing stopping them from creating a Kickstarter and hiring a couple of programmers if they're unwilling or unable to go to college for it. I don't understand how the social justice warrior mindset works. They point out some trivial thing that bothers them and only them, then proceed to complain about it as if it doesn't change, the world is going to end, like Jack Thompson and his crusade against violent games.
I'm not being sarcastic here. If this situation is so important to you, get off your ass and make a game based around your terms and your terms alone. I'm pretty sure that Polygon will give you a 10 out of 10. Maybe 11 out of 10 if it's an Xbox exclusive.
The gaming industry does have a responsibility to be more inclusive, and if the AAA market isn't going to do it, then it's up to the smaller developers to be a part of the change. And if not them, then someone should step up and start their own studio. But if a game obviously isn't targeted towards you like Grand Theft Auto 5, then don't buy it. Even Rockstar said that after Target and Kmart, which I didn't know still existed, in Australia pulled it from shelves following the complaints of social justice warriors, where they complained about the game's depiction of women. However, like Jim Sterling said, GTA 5 was pulled because of its infamy, as people are able to go into Target and buy movies and other games that feature the same amount of violent content. As I said earlier, it's more of a matter of people being intolerant and wanting preferential treatment. Gaming media repeating what social justice warriors have been saying, that game developers need to treat female characters better, is on par with politicians like Joe Biden saying that the gaming industry needs to take responsibility for its depiction of violence in their games. It's buying into the myth that violent games cause violent behavior, which is not true, as studies have shown. And again, I point out, if the gaming industry has an obligation to depict women better, then they have an obligation to depict men better.
You see what happens when you start picking and choosing things that you deem acceptable and not? you start censoring things. And if video games are an art form, then you're censoring art and freedom of expression.
Well, I do think that the gaming industry has a responsibility to be more inclusive because it creates more interest in games and generates more revenue, and I'm sure that it being the right thing to do is in there somewhere. I don't think they have an obligation to treat characters in the games with any sort of preferential treatment because of their gender or even sexual orientation. If a developer wants to depict a woman getting slapped, that's their right to do so. Same if they want to show a male getting kicked in the dick. To say that it's okay to show violence against a man but not a woman only perpetuates the stereotype that women are the weaker gender and need constant protecting, which continues to separate us into groups instead of bringing us together on equal grounds. Gaming is a form of art, and saying that you shouldn't show violence towards women or even men because it makes you uncomfortable would be censorship. Gaming media also has a responsibility, and that's not to sensationalize the controversies that happen, regardless if they truly believe that the bile that spews from social justice warriors, their own or otherwise, by picking a side and refusing to listen to the other side, is only making things worse. If gaming media is going to report on stuff like this, then they should not try to make you feel ashamed of liking a game because of the content inside of it. I myself would not say that I've chosen a side, or at least I'm trying not to sound like I have. I would say that I'm more in the middle at the moment, and I'm just looking at it all from a common sense point of view with all the actual evidence that's out there. Because if studies show that games cannot affect your behavior, then they cannot cause someone to become a misogynist or sexist against women.
But that's not all. We still have one more thing to discuss before we wrap this all up. And it's a big one. Because next week I'm going to be discussing gamer reaction and Gamergate.